Hello everyone and welcome back to Oxygen Not Included and to the Dapper Dal and to the project, or the mostly finished project from the last episode, our smart power plant. Now, it isn't entirely smart yet. As you may have noticed, this just shut down despite the fact that this battery scarcely had anything in it, really. Now, the problem with this system as it is, whilst the elements themselves are, you know, as they should be, that is, I've illustrated how to create a daisy chain of your batteries, the configuration of them here isn't really going to achieve the goal that I wanted to, and I only really realized that when I was spending a little bit of time looking at it while I was editing the last episode. The problem that we have here is that these batteries will fill up before this one has got much of a charge at all in it. We'll probably see that this one will hit its full charge shortly, and there we go, that's been shut down. We've scarcely used this battery, so we're really not getting much use out of it, and we're just introducing a source of waste for all intents and purposes, which is exactly the opposite of what we wanted to do. Now, there is a way to get the daisy chain to work the way I had first envisioned, that is with one battery controlling whether the power plants turn on, and then once they are on, filling all of the batteries before they turn back off. But it's going to require some additional automation in the form of the SR latch. Now, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of why we're going to need this until I've got it so I can illustrate it a little bit more, because the explanation is probably going to be a lot more confusing than just showing it. But to fix this system so that it is functional, at least for the time being, we're going to have to properly daisy chain these batteries along. And that is going to need, for first and foremost, need to shut down the batteries so that I can hook them up correctly. And effectively, I want the batteries to be completely daisy chained and for the last battery to control whether the power plants turn on or off. For the time being, the power plants will turn on and fill all batteries in sequence and then shut down. Whilst we're only using coal power plants, for all intents and purposes, that's exactly what it would need to do. The only reason why we would need a dedicated battery to control whether the power plants turn on or not is if we had multiple types of power plants and we wanted to give them priority. For example, if we had hydrogen generators, I would want those to be used unless they weren't sufficient, at which point turn on the coal power plants to preserve the coal that we have, or in reverse if the hydrogen was the limited fuel. Now, down to today's episode. We are going to be setting up the ranch. That's our primary goal. We have done a lot of the legwork in the last episode, but there's still a bit to go. We're not going to be looking at setting up the fully smart battery system, at least not until we have two different types of power plants running. For now, we're going to dedicate all of our research energy into ranching, and that'll be the first step, and then we'll probably grab agriculture as well, just so we've got refrigerators, as that is going to be the pinnacle of preserving our food. Now, to set up the ranch, we first and foremost need the technology that we're going to get from ranching, and that will allow us to bring the critters into the ranch. But right now we've got a bit of a carbon CO2 trap down here, and that's pushing all of the chlorine up. We really need to address that. We need the carbon skimmer set up. So let's go ahead and have a look at that. Carbon skimmer down here takes a bit of power, takes water in and CO2, returns that as heat and polluted water. It doesn't return any kind of gas, and that's the whole point of having this set up. Though it occurs to me to help this along, when our duplicates are breathing over here, let's pop in an airflow tile just there as well, because the CO2 is going to tend to want to congregate in this corner, and then it can just filter down here. We'll go ahead and hook this up to power as well, just like so. And then we're going to want to consider how we're going to run the plumbing. Now, this is a closed loop, as I've already gone over. We're not going to be using any of the clean water here, unless it's for another, for example, maybe a hospital or other sinks in here. We're not going to use any of this water for anything like the carbon skimmer. We don't want to drain our lavatories of water, getting rid of CO2. We will have a separate loop for that. But the return is polluted water, and we should be able to just happily return that back into this loop. In fact, we can bypass this one completely because it is effectively a closed loop, so we can just return that directly into the little reservoir here. But the water, now we're going to want to deliver that over here. Now, where are we going to get this water from? We are going to want another water sieve. You know what? Maybe we should pop the water sieve down here. I think that might work. Rather than have the water sieve over there, because I'm going to have to cross piping. Sure, it'll mean that we're going to have to reduce the room in this room a little bit, but that isn't the end of the world there. And that will allow us to have a little room over here. We'll pump polluted water down and then clean water back out. I think that would actually be quite a neat little system. So let's get on with that then. And there we go. Our systems are now fully set up. Power is flowing into this battery. Until that one is full, this one won't receive any charge, nor will this one. Once this one is full, the power plants will turn off. Though, interestingly, we are completely out of coal. They should be requesting coal already. Insufficient resource coal? Really? I mean, we've got coal all over the place. You lie. You tell me massive, massive lies. We've got 13.6 tons of coal. Oh, maybe it's just saying that it is empty of coal. Errands, power supply, coal generator. Could someone please come and do this? Why is that not being done? I feel that this should be a rather high priority for pretty much everyone. Obsidianist, you're picking up dirt. What on earth are you doing? I think you are feeding the farms? That shouldn't be as high a priority as anything else, I feel. Okay, well, that's a little bit of a problem. Let's pop this up on 9. There we go. A couple of people are suddenly like, oh, we need coal. Very well, I will go and do this right now. Why couldn't you have done that on a priority 8? You silly duplicants. There we go. There we are. There's loads of coal just around here. Could we also get this one, though, please? And thank you. I really, really like that, actually. There we go. Second battery in the chain, starting to get a charge. And it does fill these up really, really fast. And then the third battery in the chain. And as soon as this one's full, it should shut down our batteries in general. Sorry, our generators. There we go. Perfect. They'll run on that for quite some time. But while all that's going on, we've got more work to do. Coming into the colony, I would actually really like it if my duplicants could wash their hands a little bit more. So let's go ahead and set up a sink down here. Yeah, we could even possibly set up 2 eventually. But for now, let's just set up a little airlock. Purely so that we can control access to the colony and make sure that people are washing their hands before they get in here. And you know what? We'll go ahead and have a mechanized airlock here as well. There we go. Let's set that up. We're going to want a liquid bridge. Just taking the clean water there, up and over. And then the polluted water can come out and down. Nice and simple. And that actually gives us a little area up here where we can put some more storage. Because I've noticed that our current regular storage bins are completely chockers. So let's go ahead and fill this little area up there as well. Hooray! Research complete! Well done, Zangiri. Let's have a look at this. Critter drop-off, critter feeder, fish release, fish feeder, airborne, critter bait, grooming station, and shearing station. Marvellous. Right, those are the important parts. Now then, let's have a quick look at setting this up. First and foremost, to make the stable, we're going to want a grooming station, and that would be right about here. It's a reasonably large station. Let's put it close to the door so that my duplicant can very quickly groom as necessary. The shearing station requires 60 watts, produces a nominal amount of heat. We'll pop that in here since there are going to be Dreckos here, and even if they're not regrowing their scales, newborn Dreckos will have a fresh set of scales, so we will be able to shear them, and they just won't be growing it back initially, which is a bit of a pain, but we may as well make use of it while we can. So there we go. That should turn this into a stable. And once we've got that, we are also going to want a critter drop-off. Critter feeder we don't need because they don't get fed direct food. Instead, we would need that for the hatches, for example, and then it would be loaded with dirt or whatever we specified for it to feed them. But here, the Dreckos will eat the plants. Now, I am a little bit concerned about the CO2 and the oxygen that'll be in here. Ideally, I would want this area over-pressurized, so a much higher pressure than the outside, so that oxygen would flood out rather than CO2 flooding in. But the duplicants themselves will breathe CO2, so we may want to set up, perhaps even just allow oxygen and CO2 to move around. The main thing is to get germs off their hands rather than out of the air. For that, we would want a dedicated airlock, perhaps full of chlorine, or even just a vacuum. So, for the time being, let's pop down a little airflow towel there, so CO2 can just sink down. I think that would probably be the best idea. In fact, we're going to need the same thing down here as well. Let's start placing these around the place so that we can allow the gases to exit the runes where possible. We'll just let the CO2 just drift down. There we go. We have our sieve and carbon skimmer all hooked up and moving liquid around. Now, it is liquid neutral as far as I'm aware. The same amount of water goes in as comes back out, so the only thing that's changing is that we're having to filter it. So we're not actually losing any liquid through this. But you'll notice that this is outside of a stable, and that is because this room is too big. It is 99 tiles rather than 96. There's a very, very easy way to fix this, and that is to just build a quick ladder up here, and from here we can just drop down 3 tiles. We can pop one there, and one in the middle there, and that will drop this down to 96. And in fact, it'll give it a little bit more room for our Dreckos to wander. It'll give more surface area in the same way that your brain has more capacity for neurons because it's wrinkly rather than smooth. The wrinkles give more surface area, and thus there's more activity that can be going on, which is why koalas are kind of like, you know, about 1 million years behind in the evolution race, because they got smooth brains. They're the only animal that I'm aware of that does, as a little bit of trivia there. Let's see, can you build these up and get all of this set up? Because I would very much like to start getting the Dreckos in here. Oh my lord, super much. There we go. This should now be reachable. The room should be 97 large at the moment. Yep, we just need one more tile. There we go. It is now a stable. Perfect. It is high time that we started bringing in the Dreckos. We want Drecklets and Dreckos, please. Go ahead and bring those in. Let's go and find our Dreckos and Drecklets. Right, we should just be able to tell you to be wrangled. There we go, and likewise you. Now, there is a way that we could set this up automatically. If we made this into a stable and had a critter sensor in here that said, yeah, only, or rather, just made it into a stable full stop, and we could then set it to only allow 0 critters. It would auto-wrangle them at that point. We might be able to do that. I don't necessarily want to auto-wrangle everything in here because we've got quite a lot of critters in there at the moment, and not all of them need to be moved. And it would kind of hurt my soul a little bit if we just tied them up and left them there. Yeah, let's not do that. Let's just wrangle the critters as soon as wrangling can be done. Who is our chief wrangler? Ranching? No one really has that. Amira? That is now your top priority. Over farming, in fact. Please take care of that as soon as you're able. But on that note, we have a duplicate skill that we can hand out. We've got Unspeakable and Amira, as it happens. You know what? You can go ahead and grab that one. I know you've been wanting it for a while. Should we give Unspeakable? You know what? Sure. Let's get you helping out with this as well. Yeah, sure. We're going to give you the critter hat. Ah, it's fantastic. Where are those teeth from? Because those definitely not Drecko teeth or hatch teeth. Oh, actually, they might be hatch teeth. They look a little bit fangy. There we go. And this is why I don't want to automatically wrangle every critter. It just looks so horrible. They don't look happy. Not happy in the slightest. Go on, let's pop them in there, though. There you go. Enjoy. And on that note, we are going to need to start getting you some food. As we can see, chlorine is starting to fill this little area now, which is grand. I imagine that's largely from the bleach stone because this has managed to pull all of the CO2 out of this area. Now, the Dreckos will be able to eat the balm lily, but they do require a certain amount of balm lily per feed. Let's just have a quick look. Does it say how much it'll eat? It doesn't, unfortunately. It'll eat a certain percentage, certain certain types of meals are better than others. For example, I think a glossy Drecko will eat an entire mealwood plant, full growth down to 0, whereas it might eat far less of a bristle blossom. Oh, look at that. My lord. A little bit of perfume, some strokes, brushing of the teeth. I approve. This is now a groomed Drecko. It is happy. It's in high spirits. It's groomed. The critter has been recently attended by a kind duplicant. Oh, that's lovely. Happiness +5, wildness -55% per cycle, and it'll last for 1.5 cycles. So basically 2 cycles of grooming will take care of everything. Oh wow, you're going to shear one as well? This is fantastic. I approve. Let's have a watch of this. I love how they leap over that. There we go. It's there. Amira, it's there. There we go. Oh, that doesn't look good. Also, that texture looks all kinds of messed up. I can only assume that that will be fixed. My lord. That also doesn't exactly look very comfortable. Oh dear, you had to run out because you ran out of air. Yeah, this is why we need oxygen in here. We could put an oxygen generator. Hydrogen, oxygen, chlorine. We could manage the amount of chlorine in here, perhaps with an atmospheric sensor. Let's have a look at that. Do we have anything like that? We don't yet, but that is definitely something that we can research. Let's have a look down here. Atmos sensor, where would that be? There we go. Sends a green signal when the gas pressure enters the chosen range. So we could control whether or not we were pumping chlorine in here. We can't really control that with the bleach stone. But it may be worth us having. We can certainly use this for the hydrogen and indeed for oxygen as well. But at the very least, we've got the Drecko being sheared. We do need oxygen in here. Perhaps for the time being. Oh, there we go. We've got the reed fibers. What we could do is place in an oxygen producer. Okay, welcome back. Our first problem has reared its ugly head, and that is our barballids are not growing. They have a body temperature requirement of 35 to 85 degrees C, and this area is just, well, I'm saying this area. This area is actually quite a lot below. It's about 10 degrees lower. Down here, though, it's a little bit smaller of a gap, and it's about 5 to 4 degrees. Either way, we need to warm this up. Thankfully, we do have an option for this, and that is the space heater. There is a problem with this, though. We're getting a lot of power-hungry buildings in this room now. So I've gone ahead and preempted a burnout by disconnecting the wires along here and adding down a new power transformer, which we can now hook up. There we go. In fact, I kind of want that to be hooked up as a bit of a higher priority, so let's make sure that that happens. This one, go ahead and get that on 8, because right now, nothing is working down here. Now, the problem in here is we've got quite a lot of chlorine. I'm not sure that this is going to be able to move... well, it shouldn't actually have too much problem compressing down in here. At least the chlorine that is already around here, because there's chlorine in there, the chlorine is happily going to be able to transfer. If there was a different type of gas, one tile gap would make it hard. To that end, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to place down... that's on an 8, but place down a couple more airflow tiles just to allow motion a little bit faster there. But we definitely do need this place to warm up rather urgently. Now, where are my duplicants? They're all doing their duplicant-y things. Some of them are nomming, some of them are just having a chat, talking about sleeping. I understand. Yeah, I totally understand. We've also got a printable. Let's have a quick look over here. We could get some brine. Not particularly interested. So I'm actually going to reject everything there. I'm terribly sorry, but no. Nothing today, I'm afraid. Now, hopefully we can get this hooked up. I've gone ahead and I've got mechanized airlocks over here. They are all powered. They're all currently powered off this bank, which has a maximum draw now of 720. Over here, we've got a maximum draw of 540. So as you can see, if both of these were running off the same circuit, it would be browning out. That would not be happy fun times for us, not even slightly. And this isn't necessarily a problem to have. This doesn't introduce any particular negatives other than the fact that we have to use a bit more materials to set it up. It doesn't have an ongoing cost, unlike the batteries. Now, this is going to be pumping out quite a lot of heat for us. So hopefully we're going to be able to pull this area just up to around the 35 C range, maybe 40, I don't know. But that does beg a few other questions. We are now introducing heat into the colony. I don't want my colonists to get too hot. That's not really going to be good times for them. And whilst they'll happily be able to exist in 35 degree environments, we could suffer this area just being hotter than others, but heat is going to move around eventually. It's going to bleed into other areas. So maybe something we're going to want to do is to insulate this particular section, because this is the only part that we really care about being warm. And on the note of insulation, it's actually something I want to do with the rest of the base as well. We need to start addressing the elephant in the corner, and that is that we're next to a few warm biomes, and they are going to be bleeding heat into our base. Now we do have some areas which are cooler, and that is a boon for us, but it's not going to be enough. We do need to deal with this on a whole. Unfortunately, we've got quite a lot of chlorine in there. Perhaps we could even pump some of this CO2 up into the carbon skimmer. Make a little bit of room down here to pull more and more chlorine down. That's a possibility. On this point, we also kind of want to get all of this hydrogen somewhere where we can trap it and then pump it into the top. So how about we make a little bit of a hydrogen trap up here? Encourage this hydrogen to go straight up and linger in there. We'll run a pipe all the way down. We won't start work on that just yet, but I'll leave a kind of a mark for me of where I intend to run it. And we are going to want to have to expand out, make all of these areas at least 2 wide, so that we can properly encourage gas flowing to happen. Okay, well, on the note of insulation then, because we don't really want all of the heat just leaching straight up there, though with this there, it's going to be a problem one way or t'other. Now, there are 2 ways that we can solve this. Insulating this room, so eventually it just all of the heat builds up in one place, but that will have a hot spot, and that hot spot will be right there, as you can already see. Alternatively, there are researches that we can look into. Now, we have the Atmos sensor available, which is fantastic. So we can hook the Atmos sensor up in here shortly. But the thing that we're going to want is a thermo sensor. Now, there are 2 things that we're going to want with this. The thermo sensor to shut off the heater when it isn't required, and that'll save us a little bit of energy. It'll also unhook the gas reservoir, which would be quite nice for us. The pipe element sensor. There's a couple of things in here that would be useful for later. We don't need them strictly right now, but we are going to grab that thermo sensor. And once we've got that, the next thing we're going to want is this, a temp shift plate. This will allow us to spread the heat much more evenly across the areas here, so that we're not having a centralized heat hotspot just here. And then we could have a thermo sensor. Maybe you can get rid of one of these plants, have a little thermo sensor over there, and just check the distributed heat. And once that heat is above a certain point, we shut that off. But in the meanwhile, let's go ahead and pop down an Atmos sensor. Now, basically, I want oxygen. Let's put, well, the Atmos sensor will, the gas element sensor is really what we want. We want to check that it is oxygen and that the oxygen of a certain pressure. So let's cancel that one and just go for the gas element sensor. If there's oxygen here, then we'll disable that. We could use, if we have an AND gate, we could have both of them. If there's oxygen and the tile next to it is of a certain pressure, then we would, is below a certain pressure, then we could turn this on. But for now, we'll just have the element sensor, I think. That should be fine. It's just above the deodorizer, so that's going to be about as good a place to check for oxygen as we're going to have available to us for now. Well, this was rather unexpected, and Speaker Blair has made a mess. We have a system which it should not allow for that to happen, so something is wrong. And as we can see, output pipe is full. That should also not be possible. Okay. Well, actually, no, that doesn't seem to make too much sense to me. But I think what may be happening here is this pipe is getting confused with which direction it wants to send the liquid, the output. And because some of the liquid can try and take a turn here, that's turned this into basically a one-way pipe. that was not exactly my desire. So we can fix this reasonably easily as well, as it happens, but that's going to have to be a very high priority. So let's get that one done right now. We need a pipe bridge over here. The way that this is going to work, the pipe bridge will have an input here, so this pipe will understand the direction it needs to go, and the output over here. The output will have will yield to any liquids coming out of our hygiene loop, which generally means it's not going to back up. It's just going to have to wait. The other pipe will have priority, generally speaking. It's not always going to be the case, but let's make sure that this is built as a fairly high priority as well. It's no longer a 9 priority because people can, in fact, use everything there. But this is rather awful. What a terrible place to have made a mess. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a huge fan. Not a fan. Let's please clean that up as quickly as possible. You've got germs all over everything now, I bet. All of our... oh, no. Our food is covered in germs. Now, you may have noticed that I have got the gas element sensor set up. Now, the unfortunate thing with the gas element sensor, it'll send a positive when it detects something and always red on anything else. We want it to detect whether or not there is oxygen here, but we want to detect whether there isn't oxygen specifically. So, time for the NOT gate. And as you can see, I've already... oh, that doesn't need to be that high. I've already told them to deconstruct the automation wire there. We'll just run this across, connect it up there, and when it doesn't detect oxygen, this will run. I might even actually want it down there, but we'll see how that one goes. What's the pressure in here? Is it actually getting reasonably high? We're starting to see that the atmosphere in here is starting to get a little bit better. I'm quite pleased with that, I'll be honest. Okay, research complete. The temp shift plate is here, and as you can see, not a moment too early. We have actually managed to get quite a lot of oxygen in here, and the pressure of the oxygen up here has been compressing the chlorine down into this little area. We can see that there's a reason, well, there's actually some carbon CO2 getting pumped up here now as we have the pump active, but the chlorine that is in here is reasonably high pressure, so we can see that this is working. But as you can see here, the temperature in this little area is starting to rise. That is both good and bad. Now, one of the problems here is that chlorine is not a particularly good gas when it comes to moving heat energy around. The specific heat capacity is fairly low, and the thermal conductivity is very, very low. Now, there are ways that we can address that we can replace it with a different gas, which is not what we want, because we want the balm lilies there specifically to grow in chlorine. We can use heat pipes, either gas, for example hydrogen, which has one of the better thermal profiles for moving heat around of the gases, or we could use liquids, much the same as you would in a liquid cooling loop inside a PC to move that heat around. But those are all dependent on things moving, and really the only liquid loop that we have here that would be useful is the water loop, and that's only working when we're pumping in the tiny amounts of CO2 that we're actually pumping up there. Not exactly what we want. There's quite a lot of time where the water is just static, and that's not going to move the heat around. That's just going to warm the water up and then just slowly move it. It's not going to really have the kind of impact that we want. Instead, we're probably going to be going with a temp shift plate. Now, where are these? Here we are. Now, temp shift plates can be made of, well, pretty much anything, actually. I thought they could only be made of refined materials, but I am quite wrong. You could make them of ice. Wow. Yes, slow heating. That's probably an understatement. Accelerates or buffers heat dispersal based on the construction material used. Has a small area of effect. You'll notice that it kind of overlaps with the tiles around it. That's its small area of effect. It affects, to small degrees, the 4 tiles immediately connected to it. I believe it might actually affect the 8 tiles around it, including diagonals, but I'm not sure on that one. Now, this comes down to what material we want to use. We've got quite a few. We've even got iron ore if we really, really wanted to. The best way to work this out is to have a look through. Like, for example, we can have a look here. The thermal properties of construction material determine their heat retention, so on and so forth. Do any of them flat out say that they're a good one to use? None of them might. We can make it of coal. My lord. Overheat temperature, slow heating. That would be a big nope then. Was that igneous rock? No, it's dirt. Okay. Well, that also solves another problem then, because these are made of dirt. If we wanted to pipe water around, we could get the water to heat up and then run through the dirt tiles, which would transfer the heat up. But dirt itself doesn't carry heat particularly well, so that kind of makes that our mind up for us there. Igneous rock, no. Overheat temperature plus 15%. That means it won't get damaged by high temperatures as easily. We've got sedimentary rock, iron. It doesn't really give us much info about these. So unfortunately, we're going to have to go in and have a look around. So of the ones that we're interested in, let's have a look at copper. If we have a look at copper solid, we'll be able to see some specific information. Now, the specific heat capacity and thermal conductivity. Thermal conductivity is how fast heat energy can move into or out of this material. Specific heat capacity is how much heat energy is required to change a gram of that material by 1 degree, up or down. So how much heat energy needs to leave it, or how much heat energy needs to be entered into it before it'll change. For something that you want to transfer heat quickly, then you want something A, with a high thermal conductivity, which that's amazing, or a specific a low specific heat capacity, because that tells you that very little heat energy is required to cause it to heat up or to cool down, and it can transfer that energy very quickly. So making our temp shift plates out of copper, as you could imagine, is going to allow us to balance the heat in this room very, very aggressively. If we made it out of something like, well, let's actually pick one of the ones that is particularly slow heating, so igneous rock, so we can have a bit of a contrast there. Igneous rock. We'll see down here, this has a very high specific heat capacity, about 3 times as high as copper, and a fraction of the thermal conductivity. So heat energy would move into it or out of it a lot slower, and it would need a lot more before you saw any noticeable temperature shift, which would make igneous rock a more suitable element for an insulation rather than a heat pipe, which is why, you know, we use copper for heat pipes in a lot of industry. Sure, we could use that. I wonder if refined copper has any kind. I wouldn't think it did, but let's, you know, be certain about this. So that's copper solid there, copper ore solid. Because I was looking at the copper ore solid. Ah, so if we use copper solid, that is refined copper, we'd have significantly faster thermal conductivity. Do we really need to do it, though? How much does it need? It needs 800. I think no. I think we'll accept the 4.5. That is ridiculous. Though, out of interest, iron. Let's have a quick look at iron solid. It's got, it can take more heat, and the heat moves around a bit slower. And it's very much the same in its ore form. So yes, we'll be probably not making it out of that, but still 800 copper ore per temp shift plate. That's quite a lot. Do we have any rocks that would be particularly good? We've got igneous rock, we've got granite. Now granite has an interesting overheat temperature. Let's have a look at you. I would rather not use up my metals on this if I can possibly avoid it. In fact, that's actually not far off the thermal conductivity of copper, whilst it's got quite a decent specific heat capacity, unfortunately. Let's keep going back all the way to copper ore solid. There we are. It doesn't matter if this change happens quickly. So I think we're going to go with granite tiles. And finally, over on this side, we're going to want a thermosensor. So when this sensor detects that the heat in this area is a certain amount, I just want it to straight up shut off this. Now, I may need a NOT gate, so perhaps I shouldn't be too quick in hooking that up. We'll give this a moment first then. But we'll run the cabling. In fact, we might want to run the cabling over the top, perhaps, instead. But we'll let them get all of this sorted. Now, this is a beautifully oxygenated room there, which is lovely and all that, except that, yeah, we kind of want we want hydrogen at the top, so maybe that's the next step that we need to look at. We've got a lovely bit of hydrogen gathering up in here, and we can definitely temporarily set up some pumps around here to gather this hydrogen gas. Okay, it seems that the thermosensor has a toggle. We can choose whether to send in the green signal if something is above or below a certain temperature. So if the temperature is ever below 37°C, I want to turn on my space heater. Let's go ahead and connect up the automation wire there. That shouldn't take long at all. You can already see that a lot of the heat in this area has started to... Oh no, we've made another mess. What's happened now? That shouldn't be happening. What on earth? And thank goodness for this. What, where, why, whom, when? It seems that once again... yes, once again, this is blocking up here. Okay, I was really hopeful that this wouldn't have a choice on which direction to go, but it seems that in fact it does. So what we're going to need to do here then is pull this whole section back. I was really hopeful that the way that the logic on pipes worked, that this wouldn't cause any particular problem for us, that the priority system here wouldn't necessarily immediately try to go from an output into an input. I'm not sure why. I hope that, honestly, it was perhaps a little bit silly of me, but there is an easy enough way that we can make this happen. What we were going to do is we do need this to be deconstructed on a fairly high priority there so that we can start emptying these out. Thank goodness, though, for this. That is why we have these dotted around the base, so that we can prevent those kinds of things from happening. We are going to need to get all of that mopped up, but there are going to be more problems like this happening very, very soon if we don't get all of this taken care of rather quickly. Chop, chop down. There we go. That will immediately allow the system to evacuate. So the toilets are now back in working order. Okay, so effectively we need this to have a priority leaving this area. So I guess what we may need is another bridge here. I can't think of an easy way of having this work outside of perhaps having the bridge leading up there, or having the pipe connect above this bridge. I suppose that would work. It's not exactly the most elegant solution, but it is a solution. The temperature isn't shifting particularly well, unfortunately, and none of our balm lilies are presently growing due to temperature. I'm assuming, yeah, body temperature. So we're going to need to go ahead and flesh this out a little bit more, and I'm going to have this on a fairly high priority. Let's get all of these done so that the temp shift plates will share the heat directly between them. Now again, the temp shift plates are taking the heat from the space heater, or possibly from the chlorine. I'm not sure if the temp shift plates themselves take from the device that is on the tile. The temp shift plates are in the background. The space heater isn't sat on them. It isn't making any contact to them as far as I'm aware. So as a result, it is still taking the heat from the air, but it is sharing it and spreading that out a little bit more effectively. I apologize for the lots of maybes and I think or / I hope. I'm certainly no expert with Oni. We are learning at the same time. If you do happen to know categorically whether the space heater is in contact with the temp shift plate, please do let me know. At last, look at this. Our Dreckos have finally got some food. I mean, it's kind of hovering between the temperatures, but there we go. It actually managed to do what it needs to do. I think there's a little bit of CO2 just floating around still. There's an awful lot of chlorine over here, and that's not really allowing much of the CO2 to drift in this direction. So it's just kind of hovering. Eventually that will hopefully fix itself. We've even got a bit of hydrogen up top, and our Dreckos should generally start to be a little bit happier. Are you not tamed? You are tamed. Why are you not going for food? Are you gobbling up all of the grub? Yes, and you're pretty happy with yourself as well. You little scallywag, you. It's fine. Once we've got more of these all producing, that should be okay. I believe a Drecko will consume about 17% of a balm lily's growth per feeding, and they need that per cycle. So you may or may not be able to get down there and gobble up the food. We'll have a watch of you. I'm a little bit worried about that, actually. I mean, I guess it's not the worst in the universe. Did you eat? No. Little bit worried there, I'm not gonna lie. hopefully you can, in fact, go and get some grub. We'll see. But with that done, I mean, we may end up losing one of our Dreckos, which will be a big shame considering the amount of effort that we've gone to try and save them. But with that in mind, at least one of them is getting fed, which means one of them eventually will lay some eggs, which means we're going to want a way to speed the process of them hatching. It takes quite some time for an egg to hatch naturally. And there are lots of things you can do with eggs. I suspect that a large amount of the food that we get from the Dreckos will be excess eggs. And that's going to take a little time for us to get to, but this will probably be quite a nice little incubation area over here. So I see no particular reason not to use it as such. So we're going to pop down automatic door, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a large area though. We could possibly have several incubators in here. They are reasonably large structures though, so we might want to consider that. We may need to set something else up, but it is quite possible for us to do something along these lines and have the incubators set up like this. Let's go ahead and pop there. That would allow us for 4 incubators at a time. Odds are we're not going to want that many incubators. The other thing we could do is we could use this as a small hatch farm, I suppose. I mean, the hatches are going to require far less investment of resources. We could just feed them the ridiculous amounts of various things. We've got cultivatable soil. I wouldn't really want to give you my dirt, but I have got 159 tons of the stuff. We could have a look at raw mineral. 200 tons of sandstone might be worth feeding to our hatches, and we do have quite a lot of them around, so that is definitely an option for us. But at this stage, most of our balm lilies are now starting to grow, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm very, very pleased with that. We may yet save the life of our starving little critter. I'm not sure if it's going to try or not. I really can't tell. There's definitely balm lilies in here that you can go ahead and gobble down. I really hope you do. But you just... What? Oh, you laid an egg. You're about to die. Well, that is a bit of a shame there. Oh, actually, no, you're hungry. Is I looking at the wrong one? Yes. Okay, well, there is a Drecklet egg. We are going to want to let that eventually... Are you going to grab some food? Please grab some food. Oh, no, you just ate the food! You little scoundrel, you! That was your last moment. That was your last chance, I suspect. I think that may be it for you, unless you can gobble down one of these. Come on. You've got 0.7 cycles. I'm going to be broken-hearted if you die after all this work. You little wretch. Research complete. We've got the farm station, the fertilizer center, the hydroponic farm, park sign, and refrigerator. There we go. Now that has brought us one step closer to getting animal control. The refrigerator, though, is of particular interest to us because that means that we can replace these with refrigerators, and we may even then isolate this room a little bit more and possibly make a water reservoir over here, an actual reservoir. That is something I wouldn't mind doing. Still, having the reservoir isolated, perhaps having a door over here, maybe even dropping this down by 1 extra tile and having a lip, a door, and then the reservoir in here, it does make it closer to the place where we're going to be using water the most. But as it stands, this is still actually fairly close. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing with water yet. I do want somewhere for our clean water to get sent, especially when we've got that large body of water over there that we're going to want to get access to. But it is definitely one thing that we're going to want to pop in here, and that's an egg cracker. And given the size of the room, maybe I'm not going to pop any water on this side. We will need to have a think about this one. I do think we're going to have an egg cracker though. Let's go ahead and get that in place. I'm not going to queue up anything to be cracked, however. Are you going to make it? You've got seconds left. Come on, there's balm lilies all over the place. Please go and get one. Don't make me watch you die from starvation. Not when there's food there. That's almost as bad. I was going to say it's worse, but it's not really worse. Let's be honest. That's almost as bad as when you die in a boss fight with an inventory full of healing pots. Almost. It is still pretty bad, though. Please feed yourself. I can't force feed you. Can I force feed you? I'm not sure. Nevertheless, we've got some things. Oh, more ice. I think we will accept the ice, yes please. Let's go ahead and get that down here right now. In fact, let's get a high priority sweep order. Right there, we'll sweep everything up that's in that space. You are going to make me watch, aren't you? You little scallywag, you. What's the temperature over here? The temperature's still below 37, which is fine. We've got one at 23. Do you need it to be at 25? It might be something along those lines. Maybe they can't eat it unless it's at 25, but I'm fairly certain that you've been gobbling things down the moment they had more than 17. Come on. Look, don't pass it up. Eat it, please. No! You stupid little Drecklet, you. I'm not going to accept responsibility for that one. I did everything in my power. Maybe I was a little bit slow on getting everything up and running, but it was up and running by the time that you let yourself die. You derp. Research complete. The critter trap, the incubator, fish trap, and critter sensor. Now, the critter sensor in particular is going to be quite important to us. As you can see, I've set up this little area over here. Now, I could just have a very wide but not very tall reservoir, but then a lot of this space would be wasted to some degree. I'm not sure if we're going to store anything in particular over on here, but I do want to make use of the space rather than simply waste it. So I am going to probably have some kind of storage system over here, but I do want to have enough mesh tiles there to make this area work out. Let's grab another pneumatic door. As you can see, I have got some airflow tiles down here. I'm fairly certain that this will not allow us to build through the tiles, but just in case it does, I figured that I'd put that down and maybe we can for science this later. Ultimately, I am going to elect to drop this down maybe another 2 or 3 tiles, so we've got quite a large reservoir for clean water. We might even have some sort of processing over on this side. In fact, we may even be able to have some method of turning grey water into potable water if we filled this room with chlorine. Now that is quite an idea. Quite an idea. One that I might look into in the future. But for the time being, I don't think we'll be worrying too much about that one. But we do now have access to quite a lot of new things. We've got the grass reservoir, a large building. Now, the way that these things work is this can just store a kind of gas. It can store all sorts of gas, I believe. It can have any amount. It isn't specific to only one type. For example, the first gas that goes in there doesn't prime it to only accept that gas, but the gas reservoir has quite a large capacity and you know, can store it in a small area. One of the best uses for it, though, is that if you put this into a sterile environment, for example, surrounded in chlorine, then the chlorine will kill the germs of anything in the reservoir. And the same is true of the liquid reservoir as well. We now have the fire poles, which are glorious in every way. So we're going to actually have these dotted around where it makes sense to pop them. One down here as well. We'll just have that go all the way down there. Actually, since we're doing it on that side, I guess we'll do the same on this one as well, just to keep things nice and equal. We'll do the same over there. Now that will allow my duplicants to make very rapid ascent, or it won't allow them to ascend. It will only allow them to descend, but they'll do it much faster. We've got the refrigerator, we've got the incubator over here. We need more refined metals. Well, finally we've got a reason to do it. Now, is there any particular benefits to making it? I doubt it, so let's go for the ore that we have the most of. Metal ores, and that would be by far and away copper. So sure, let's go ahead and pop in quite a lot of that to be made, please and thank you. Let's get that on the go. We've got hydroponics and all of these sorts of things we're not really too fussed about. We've got high pressure gas vent, but that requires plastic, not something that we're going to have access to for quite some time. We can now use polluted water to produce fertilizer. You need to put phosphorite in and polluted water, not much, and a little bit of dirt. What you'll get back out is fertilizer, natural gas, and a reasonable amount of heat. I think convert polluted dirt into fertilizer for domestic plants. This will allow us to, if we really wanted to, have a natural gas generator running off this, but from what I understand, you need a lot of them to have enough to generate sufficient natural gas. What else have we got in here? Let's just get all of these out of the way. We now have insulated and radiant gas pipes, so we can actually start specifically moving gas around with a view to transferring heat, if that is our goal. We have the park sign. Classifies an area as a park or nature reserve. I think the parks have to have a certain maximum size. A nature reserve, 120 is quite nice, but anyone moving through it would be very, very happy. But it needs at least a certain amount of wild plants and no industrial machinery in there. We could possibly look to setting that up at some point. We've got the farm station, something we're not going to be looking at for a while. The thermal regulator will cool gas piped through it, but output heat in its immediate vicinity. This does not destroy heat. It will cool whatever gas goes through it by, I think, about 14 degrees. But that heat energy, however much heat energy was required to cool that gas by 14 degrees, will be vented into the machine itself and then into its environment. They can overheat and break quite easily if you don't put them in an environment that can pull that heat away from them fast enough. But that is definitely something we can start looking at if heat becomes a problem. And the critter sensor. Now this one is important. Sends a green signal or a red signal based on the number of eggs and critters in the room. Now, it's really important to note that it is the eggs as well as the number of critters in the room. We're not going to be having any particular use for that one for just now, but sooner rather than later we're going to need it. The incubator, how large are these? Can we actually see that at all? Unfortunately not. Incubates critter eggs until ready to hatch. Pulls a lot of power to do it. Outputs a decent amount of heat as well. Well, that makes sense, I suppose. It can be automated. Enables disabled to core. Incubators can maintain the ideal internal conditions for several species of critter egg. Now, the nice thing about this is you can have an incubator set for each type of egg. Now, that may actually make use of the critter sensor in here. This room should be able to handle the maximum amount of Dreckos that we want. What I could do is always have one Drecko incubating until there is a certain amount of eggs in here. And at that point, the eggs no longer go to the incubator and instead go to some sort of storage. Now, eggs in storage will decay and will eventually die. They will become less and less viable the longer they're held in storage in that way. So it's not the ideal solution, not if you want to actually make use of those eggs and actually hatch them eventually. But by using priority systems, you can force the eggs to eventually be only useful as food, and so you don't even have to crack the eggs necessarily, which may be something we'll look into doing. That is definitely something we can do. Right now I can force them to crack an egg if I particularly want to, and that may be something that we can look at in the future. Now, gristleberries. There is no reason not to do that forever. Barbecue, no reason not to do that forever. Needs 3,200 calories of meat and get 4,000 calories barbecue at a fairly nice quality as well. We do actually have that. One Drecko makes one barbecue, basically. One bristleberry at 1,600 gets turned into a gristleberry at 2,000. Very nice exchange, because these are nice quality meals. Fried mushroom, you know what, there is, again, no reason not to make that whenever and however often we have the opportunity. Okay, so as soon as we have the materials, we're going to start looking at setting up a incubator setup in here. And while Zankiri had nothing else to do, I just had him research electrolyzers. Now, that's the last thing that we're going to need to set up our own oxygen production. Now, that is still tied to having liquid available to us, which we don't as yet have, like, or at least not a renewable source of water, which is what we're going to need. Whilst Zangiri now has nothing else to do, I'm going to get him to start making his way towards the memory toggle, which is what we're going to need for our battery system, the way we're going to want it to be set up, and that is going to be necessary for the next episode's main project, which will be setting up an electrolyzer setup, which will include a hydrogen generator, because I'll want these generators to run at different priority sets while still filling the main battery bank. That is going to require the SR latch, and we have some shine nymph eggs. What a wonderful thing to have. Now, when these hatch, we are going to have some beautiful, beautiful shine nymphs, and they will add a lot of decor. We're probably not going to ranch them. I don't think there's really much reason to. You can use their eggs for omelets, but I don't really think they give any kind of meat, which is probably something that I would want them to give to make it worthwhile having. Now, do we have enough? Oh, there we go. We've got an incubator. Oh, it's only a 2x2, so that means we could realistically have a couple of these set up then. Now that does change things. I think for the time being, though, we'll go with... sure, we can just have a couple set up on this ground floor here. That shouldn't be a problem, and then have one storage up top. Let's go ahead and pop you down right there. Now we have got the critter center all built. Let's have a look at this. Send a green signal if we are below, let's say, 8 critters. If we aren't at maximum capacity, then I want my incubator active. So there we go. That should be sending out a green signal right now. And the moment that this has maximum capacity, then it should shut it off. With that, we should be able to hook this up nice and easily into the incubator there. And then make sure that that's got some power. There we go. And once that's all done, this is going to be quite awesome, I think. And that'll probably be the last thing that we do in this episode. We still don't have much hydrogen in here, and that's a shame. I do want to make sure that we get some in here reasonably soon. Seeing the balm lilies are starting to grow, but there's really only one Drecko in here eating them. So, you know, that makes a lot of sense. They can live for a very long time, my lord. So they're not going to perish anytime soon. As far as this goes, I want the max critters in here to be 8. Once it has more than 8, start wrangling them if we need to. Now, that being said, this will also count eggs, I believe. I'm going to set on the auto wrangler and we'll see how that goes. But that may need a little bit of tweaking as the time comes, because I have not done ranching at all before. As you can see, though, progress is being made on our little reservoir area. When that's done, we're going to seal off this area. We're going to probably drop this by a little bit just to have some more refrigeration in there. I'm not sure that we're going to do that over here. We may actually even have a pump down here just to try and move any CO2 out of this area. And to that end, it may be worth us just going ahead and popping down some airflow tiles just to allow the CO2 to move in here. Eventually, this whole reservoir will probably be filled with water, which would push any CO2 up and out. It would compress it a bit, but if we have a pump over here, then it should be okay. We'll see how that goes. Maybe the pump can be set to activate only if it detects CO2 in the room right over in this corner tile here, because ultimately that's where the CO2 would try to move, especially if we had an oxygen vent over here pushing the CO2 down there, and then we could just suck it up and pull it out. That may be something we're going to have to do, but we have almost got our incubator set up. Let's speed that time up just a little bit because I'm super impatient. There we go. And pump. There we are. Now, I want this to only work on Drecko eggs. So Drecko egg. Continuous. Sure. You can incubate these. I would like this at a very high priority. If there is room in this, I want the egg stored there. And I want this one to only take a critter egg if there is nowhere else to store it. On that note, I'm going to say only take Drecko eggs. For now. That's the only thing that I would like stored in there. But there we go. The egg is being delivered. Hopefully we'll be able to get this hooked up very, very soon. Actually, how much power is on this network? Ooh. Oh no, the potential load is fine. We are just okay. I may need to run the incubators on a separate loop then, because they are very power hungry. 4 incubators in here would be reasonable to say that they would use up way more energy than I have to easily make available. Perhaps if I move this across, perhaps had this one powered from a transformer here, and then a third transformer purely powering the incubator setup, that would be fine, especially if we had 4 separate species being ranched, and I can see no reason why we wouldn't. I think a hatch ranch is definitely worth setting up. There we go. So this is incubating at 7%, producing a heck of a lot of heat. So we are probably going to want to cool this down in some way. Oh, Amira, that is so ridiculously cute. Oh my good lord. I suppose that's critical wrangling trait. Incubator maintain the ideal internal condition for several species of critter eggs. Okay. Has that done anything in particular? It was stored for a little bit, so unfortunately it did lose some viability, but it is now incubating very, very quickly. Lullabied, 13% per cycle. Wow, okay, so that's actually pretty cool. So the base incubation rate is now 3% per cycle, and with the Lullabied, it's growing even faster. That is ridiculously cute. Oh my good lord. But I think that's a successful mission there. We have got our ranch such that it is set up. We will probably set up another one over in this space. And I'm thinking, or I'm leaning very, very heavily toward hatches. Hatches will produce quite a lot of coal for us, which we are obviously going to need for everything that we're working on right now. So that would definitely help. And we can continue mining out this little area there. Get everything out of here as we can. Now, the problem with this, I'm not sure how deep this can go. I'm fairly certain that might be as deep as it can go. So, if we pump water in here, we're going to need to make sure that we're pumping a lot of it. So we're probably going to need to tap this water source as well, this little underground lake, and fill this up at least to the point that it reaches the pitcher pump. At that point, we can start hunting around for other sources down here, perhaps, or even looking at the possibility of setting up a liquid reservoir in here and just filling this room with chlorine and a bit of automation to turn grey water into clean potable water. I think that would actually be pretty cool. But the next big project is going to probably exist up here, where we're going to try and set up some oxygen production out of water. Now, this one won't require clean water. It just needs water. That is, sorry, it won't require potable water. It just needs water that isn't polluted. So we will be able to use that with the runoff from the lavatory system. So we may see how that one goes. But that is it from me. I really do hope you've enjoyed, and will be joining me for the next. But until then, and as always, do take care, everyone.